thank you for joining us. Israeli naval forces intercepted an Iranian arms vessel carrying medium-range missiles in the Red Sea, about 930 miles from the Israeli coast. The shipment was headed for the Gaza Strip via Sudan, according to Israeli sources. It also says the boat originated from Iran and had Syrian-made rockets on board, intended for militants' use in the Gaza Strip. Hamas, meanwhile, denied any involvement, said that the story is being used by Israel to justify the blockade on Gaza. To hear more about it, we're very glad to be joined in studio by Haaretz senior defense correspondent Amir Oren. Amir, good morning to you.
Morning.
And, of course, by the director of the Moshe Dayan Center for Middle Eastern Studies at Tel Aviv University, Professor Uzi Rabi. Professor Rabi, good morning to you as well.
Morning.
And before we break this down, let's take a look at the following report.
A small window into the covert war being waged between Israel and Iran. On Wednesday, the IDF intercepted an Iranian shipment of advanced weaponry destined for the Gaza Strip.
While Iran is conducting these talks, smiling to the international community, it continues to arm terrorist groups, it continues to perpetrate terrorism around the world. Such an outlaw regime must not be allowed to have the means to make atomic bombs.
Several months ago, IDF intelligence identifies a weapons transfer of M302 rockets from Damascus to Tehran, a move orchestrated by Iran's elite Quds force. The missile, with a maximum range of 215 kilometers and a warhead weighing as much as 175 kilograms, would place Israel's major civilian centers at risk. The weapons are moved from Tehran to Bandar Abbas Port in southern Iran and subsequently loaded onto a civilian vessel, the KLOS-C. The ship docks in Qasr Port in Iraq, where it is loaded with additional containers with the aim of whitewashing the Iranian connection. It then heads towards Port Sudan, but is intercepted by the elite Israeli Naval Commando Unit Shayetet 13. Alternatively, the rockets would have been transferred by land through the Sinai Peninsula and into the hands of Gaza-based groups such as Hamas and the Islamic Jihad. While Iran has denied all involvement, the KLOS-C is not the first arms shipment intercepted by the IDF that had Tehran's fingerprints on it.
January 2002, the Kerry A en route from Iran to Gaza is found to contain 50 tons of weapons. November 2009, 500 tons of Iranian-made arms are confiscated aboard the Frankop. March 2011, the Victoria has stopped carrying 50 tons of weaponry, including Iranian-made surface-to-sea missiles.
But Wednesday's haul is distinguished by the lethality of its cargo. The M302, in the wrong hands, would have the capacity to upset an already volatile regional balance.
First joined from Jerusalem by the Foreign Press IDF spokesman, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner. Peter, good morning to you.
Morning, again.
Okay, first of all, how long was this ship tracked?
Indeed, we've been following this vessel, not necessarily the vessel, we've been following the shipment of rockets for several months now. Indeed, in depth, extremely exposing intelligence, which enabled us to follow it basically from A to Z, from the port of the international airport in Damascus, through Tehran, through Bandar Abbas seaport, through Qasr in Iraq, and all the way into the Red Sea. So extremely extensive intelligence.
Now, in terms of the missiles found on this vessel, what is different about these rockets?
I think ultimately the huge success of this mission, of Operation Full Disclosure, is that the Israeli Defense Forces yesterday saved Israeli lives. These rockets, with a maximum range in their most advanced model, could have reached most of Israel, putting millions and millions of Israelis' lives at risk.
Is this the first time such long-range missiles are being found en route to Israel?
The Gaza terrorist organizations don't have weapons of this capacity today. We're not aware of these types of weapons in their hands. And if they would have succeeded in reaching their destination, it would have possibly been a game changer, depending on the volume. Indeed, we're still looking into the shipment, and it's on its way, and it will still take a couple of days until we can distinguish exactly what is on board and the volume of that, and then that would actually determine if it is that game changer. But the tens of rockets that we found on board already definitely indicate a substantial threat to the state of Israel.
All right. And finally, this ship is now being diverted by Israel. It's heading to Eilat, isn't it?
The Colossi is indeed en route to Eilat. It's being accompanied by our missile boats, and the forces are on their way back to Israeli shores.
Okay. Lieutenant Colonel Peter Lerner, thank you so much for joining us from Jerusalem. Professor Uzi Rabi, I'd like to start with you. Presumably, if the Israeli intelligence and all this, great capture is correct, what is Iran trying to do?
Well, this is part of what we call Iranian general strategy. This is a well-known modus operandi which is being practiced by Iran. It's not new. But the thing is just simple as that. First of all, Iran is capitalizing on what we call no man's lands in this region, either by land or sea. Just have some bargaining chips in Yemen, Houthis, in Sudan, in Morocco, in other places. But in this occasion, I would say that to equip Hamas or Islamic Jihad with those missiles is just to hold the opportunity to create, if and when, a havoc to Israel. This is something that is part of the Iranian modus operandi. And what is very fascinating here is that Iran, capitalizing on the new atmosphere, the new, let us say, different picture we have in the Middle East, and in tandem, holds both hands. On the one hand, talk to the West. Right. On the other, actually go on with those bargaining chips that are being installed everywhere in the region.
No, and that's a very good point, which leads me to Amir Oren, senior defense and correspondent analyst for Haaretz. The timing of this, if Iran is indeed playing this double game, this timing of this is actually quite perfect for the Israeli administration, isn't it?
There are political overtones to what is called full exposure, and of course the Israeli government is in control of naming its operations. So rather than take a random code word, it chose full disclosure to point at what the Iranians are doing. And of course, Prime Minister Netanyahu is in the United States. However, this operation was planned long ago. It was supposed to take effect a few weeks ago. But because the ship went north to Qasr in Iraq in order to try and disguise its movements, the operation coincided with Netanyahu's visit, so one should not read too much into the propaganda value of this operation, because for the American administration, it is not so simple. The fact that the Iranians are involved in terror activities throughout the Middle East is well known. This is one reason why the Obama administration wants to broaden its dialogue with Iran and hold it not only on the nuclear issue, but rather get a sort of a ceasefire or a broader agreement to hold off on all such activities. And this ties with the report we heard earlier this week about Israel being asked to stop its actions against Iranians, nuclear scientists, because if one side is to stop its activities, the other side would also be asked to do it.
Now, is that in fact then, Professor Uzi Rabi, is this type of a move a game changer for Iran? Is that something, and you mentioned before you started saying that it shows the effects of what's going on in the region, that Iran is playing this double game, but that they can change the game by moving weapons as such? Is this a game changer then?
It's not a game change phenomenon. It's something that we have seen before, but this time what is new is that Iran is doing that in tandem. Basically, my observation is different. I think that Rouhani and Javad Zarif are not authorized to talk, but only on the nuclear file. If you would like to talk about Syria-Lebanon file, you have to talk to General Qasem Soleimani, the commander of the Quds unit force of the Pasdaran, the Revolutionary Guards. He is on charge of that part of the Middle East. And here you could see the polarization in Iranian policy making. Javad Zarif, Rouhani are skilled diplomats. What they are about to do is to talk with the 5+1 about the nukes. I'm pretty sure, I'm not sure about that, but if I would have been asked about that, I would say that if they, because actually logic makes you ask, why won't we have kind of a package deal?
Right.
Why won't we have actually you get out of that part of the region, and in return we're going to actually bring in some other modifications and get to closer to an agreement, a whole agreement, not only about the nukes. I think that this is what Iran means. On the one hand, to capitalize on the weakness they think the West have there, actually, and the other thing is just to go on with those apparatus of the Pasdaran, of the Revolutionary Guards, which, as I said before, installing bargaining chips for rainy days, and this is part of the Iranian modus operandi. I think all the more reason why Iran go on doing that, especially as it sees what's going in Ukraine, especially as it get what happened in Syria in September 2013. I think that Iran takes it the whole thing just the other way around.
Yeah, if they're looking then at the entire map, and Amir Oren, you being, a defense analyst, are these bargaining chips, are they trying to actually place all these little, elements around the region for the years to come? For this big brouhaha, forget nuclear weapons, forget that. That, seems to be out of the way. And this is leading up to something else with the borders with Syria and Lebanon, etc.
Right. Vis-a-vis the United States, these are indeed bargaining chips. But against Israel, as Professor Rabi has indicated, this is a sort of a strategic reserve for the day Israel threatens or even executes its operation against the Iranian nuclear infrastructure, which is one reason why Iran was so angry at Hassan Nasrallah 8 years ago when he, in effect, wasted the strategic reserve that they built there with missiles after trying to kidnap Israeli soldiers and getting Israel to retaliate and destroy these missiles. So they were trying to bring these missiles into Gaza, not in order to shoot them tomorrow or next month,
to have them there,
to have them as deterrents. Or one even worse scenario is that the missiles would not get as far as Gaza, but be hidden in the Sinai desert in order to be launched at Israel from Sinai in order to involve Egypt, although Egypt, of course, under its military administration is trying to pursue these jihadists in the Sinai. But nevertheless, the range that these missiles have would have enabled them to be shot from Sinai. And one other point, technologically, it's a very, very good achievement for the West to get these missiles for reverse engineering in order to know how to intercept them, not only when they are being shipped, but even in the air.
If they are already in the region, which, we can only presume, but if that's the agenda to get missiles as such close onto Israeli borders.
No, they are in Syria, and perhaps they are also in Lebanon because they are held by Hezbollah. So having this type of missile given to Israeli scientists and engineers would let them perfect the Iron Dome system and other missile intercept systems.
So decipher how these missiles work and then, how to counteract them. And interestingly enough, as you mentioned, it is Syria and Lebanon that are putting in play on this chessboard, Professor Rabi. So Syria, I think Syria's also news agency was also reacting to the capture of this ship. When it comes to the Syrian-Israeli border and stuff like that, because Syria is involved in this shipment. This is supposedly Syrian missiles, right? No, I mean, are we looking at more of a warming up on the Israeli-Syrian border, or that is a point of a flare that Iran is using when we see things like that?
I think that Bashar doesn't like that idea at this stage, but he has to obey. And this is how Iran's cynically capitalizing on Hezbollah and Syria. And I fully agree with Amir. If something doesn't work in Syria, and we have to bear in mind, this is still the Shiite axis, being stretched from the Persian Gulf to the eastern flank of the Mediterranean. So Iran is investing in that. On the other hand, as I said before, Iran has to make sure that if something goes wrong with talks, with Syria, you always have kind of a lever to use in order actually to change or to influence the other partners. And this is something that you should put there in order to use it as havoc to Israel, as I said before, if and when it is needed. Basically, this is the general Iranian strategy, and we have to just remind ourselves one more time that Syria is not a state anymore. We talked about that. We have Alawistan, we have Kurdistan. The Iranians are trying actually to hold Bashar there, to hold Hezbollah, because this is part of the axis with Maliki in Iraq. And we have to understand that this is a huge sectarian war, which is still there. Iran is looking at this as one of its most, I would say, strategic assets.
Right.
And this has no relation whatsoever to the talks being held with the 5+1. And this is why I think that these are two different files. And Ayatollah Ali Khamenei from above would not let the diplomats deal with the Syrian or the Lebanese file. This is something that the Revolutionary Guard said.
Interesting, the separation between that and the talks, rightfully so. Professor Rabi, thank you. Amir Oren, thank you for joining me. When we get back, Russian media covers the Ukrainian crisis. We'll take a closer look. First news. Good morning, and thank you for joining us. I-24 News Morning Edition, where you should be, because this is the only place where we get to say hello and good, well, you know, not the only place, but the most important place, where we get to say hello and good morning to our one and only Anthony Grant, who joins us daily to discuss the news you missed while scanning the headlines. And
hey, good morning.
Yay, yes.
Well, you know, here's a story that kind of slipped underneath the radar with all of the other things happening in the world. About Lebanon, of course.
Right.
Lebanon, a complicated country. And there was a meeting for various powers to give Lebanon a military boost against the Syria war spillover. And this meeting was taking place in Paris on Wednesday, and it involved sort of called the International Support Group for Lebanon. And France in particular were talking about sealing a multi-billion-dollar deal to help modernize Lebanon's armed forces. But which is very important. But the interesting thing is that even though there were people from the UN there, I think even Ban Ki-moon, I believe, was at the meeting, there was apparently no mention of UN Security Council Resolution 1701, which, as we know, calls for the disarmament of all armed groups in Lebanon. So, which implies
supposedly
Hezbollah.
Was there?
Pardon?
And Ban Ki-moon supposedly was there?
I believe so. And if he wasn't there in person, he was certainly an ardent advocate giving sanction to this meeting.
Okay.
So again, Lebanon a thorn in many countries' sides for many different reasons, but again on the sidelines of Ukraine.
No, and it's fascinating because I think it also shows that the West doesn't know who to support, how to support, and what to do. And
how to enforce existing resolutions, which is a major issue.
Yes, definitely.
In this part of the world. Also a little bit under the radar, but not in France. The Times of London reporting on Sarko leaks. Yes, there have been leaked tapes with recordings of former French President Nicolas Sarkozy. The French press is abuzz, and of course the British press is not far behind.
Of course.
One of the things that has emerged is that Carla Bruni, the former First Lady, was a little bit upset that while she was in the Élysée Palace as Sarkozy's First Lady, that she couldn't make too much money from her regular professional modeling, music activities, and so she was.
There's a limit on how much you can, on how much the First Lady in France can earn as a First Lady.
I think that there's a bit of a separation. I think that once you're as a public figure in that capacity, that's what you're doing, is what emerged. But that's what the Times of London picked up on. But there were basically some of these recordings are being published verbatim in French newspapers. And apparently Sarkozy was not making such great comments towards members of his own cabinet, showering some with contempt, and nothing earth-shattering, but it's shaking up France because it's so unprecedented that a public figure's words would have been recorded by one of his advisors and published. I was about to say how very
Watergate-ish. In many ways.
Watergate.
Watergate.
You know, so that's gonna.
Everybody's taping everybody.
Everything.
Come on, what is going on?
So there could be further revelations. We'll see as we check out the French press.
And maybe she can write music to those recordings. I never said that.
Maybe she will. And also in the French press, Le Figaro, which tends to be a pro-Sarkozy kind of newspaper, as a story which Brussels, referring to the European Commission, is hitting out at France's economic malaise. Basically, the European Union is putting France on alert that they need to kind of buck up and giving it the same sort of treatment as Spain and Ireland in terms of their economic performance or lack thereof is being closely monitored. And, you know, France is having issues. Unemployment is always been, for a long time, a huge pull on the economy, the lack of job growth.
Especially in these recent years, as Europe is going through most of that.
So France is now on what's called surveillance renforcée, or kind of like double secret probation, only it's very open. So they need to
and I
mind
know that it's coming from the Belgians.
Coming from the Belgians, the European Union.
The European Union first, and still, you know, in Brussels. Okay.
And still on the European note, the Independent of UK reports that Boris Johnson's sister, Boris Johnson being the mayor of London, his
colorful character,
great haircut, arguably. His sister went on a poverty safari, so-called poverty safari in a section of London.
Qu'est-ce que c'est? What is a poverty safari?
A poverty safari is when a very wealthy person goes to look at how poor people live. And
nice.
It was part of a BBC documentary.
Oh, my Lord.
And she went to a place called Deptford, which is in southeast London, where there's a lot of people existing on £1 a day, their food expenditures.
Unlike him, Boris' privately educated sister. Yeah.
And she says that a lot of her friends are now envious because they've never encountered poor people.
That was her reaction after seeing poor people.
Yeah.
That, oh my God.
It's an amazing story,
I wish I could
actually.
share this with the world.
You know, the article does mention that almost 5 million British people are living in food poverty. So maybe this documentary will shed light on that. But her comments were a little bit,
Yeah, I mean, let's search for the word.
Marie Antoinette-esque.
I was about to say, why don't they just eat cake?
Yeah, or scones.
Oh my God, I wish you could see this with me, folks. Look at how some people live.
Yeah, well, and one of her friends called it a poverty safari, so that's what the headline pulled. Interesting term, huh?
Yes, the hierarchy.
On the other side of the pond, the New York Post reports on an interview that Pope Francis gave to Corriere della Sera, in which he says he's no Superman. Now,
I beg to differ, I have to say.
Now, this is the thing. Even as the Vatican is issuing commemorative stamps and coins in a DVD with never-before-seen Pope footage. So there's all this amplifying.
That's just an explosive line, a DVD of never-before-seen Pope footage.
I quote from the. I quote from the article.
Okay, no, of course.
But he is not, you know. So he's saying, you know, tamp it down, world. But by the same token, the Vatican is loving this moment, because the more that we talk about him, the less we talk about Vatican scandals of various kinds.
Anything within, you know, the institution that is the Catholic Church, I think, is doing wonders. It's a very good point that you're raising, because, I mean, you know, I love the press that he generates, be it, you know, faux pas that he says in there, great stories, doves brought out in the air that are being, all that kind of stuff. But then you think, you know, is this not, you know, if he doesn't really act and do something when it comes to within the church, changing old dogma?
And he says the dogma is going to stay the same, pretty much, or for the lion's share of it. So he says, you know, despite the publicity, don't expect seismic shifts anytime soon in the Vatican.
And if anything changes, it is going to take 250 years.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting stuff. Tony, thank you so much for joining me on this hour, because I know I can wait for you for the next hour. So thank you.
See you in a bit.
On to our next topic, and that is the Ukraine from a different angle. A presenter on Vladimir Putin's state-funded international television channel, Russia Today, has gone rogue a few days ago, making a passionate on-air statement declaring what the Kremlin is doing in the Ukraine is wrong. A rare incident in Russian media. It raises the question about how media has covered and is handling the Ukrainian crisis. This also followed by another Russia Today anchor who yesterday resigned on the air because of what Russia is doing in the Ukraine, according to her. But before we delve into the subject and how the media is covering the Ukraine, let's take a look at the latest 24 hours in that crisis.
A week after the Crimean crisis began, a possible solution has arisen.
American Secretary of State John Kerry held a meeting today with his Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov in Paris during the International Conference on Lebanon.
Today we are trying to use every diplomatic opportunity to bring Russia and Ukraine into direct contact with each other at a senior level, to make sure that the governments of Russia and Ukraine are talking to each other, which the Russians have not been prepared to do at a senior level in recent days.
The EU announced today it is ready to assist Ukraine with special aid.
The package combined could bring an overall support of at least 11 billion euros over the next couple of years from the European Union budget and European Union-based international financial institutions.
Meanwhile, Ukrainian forces are starting to make their presence known in the conflict areas. 4 Ukrainian pilots escaped with their aircraft from a Crimean airport controlled by Russian forces, while in the city of Donetsk, police managed to evacuate pro-Russian protesters who took over the government building last Monday. The current crisis has already raised one cultural hero, Russia Today TV anchor A.B. Martin, who spoke out against the Russian invasion live on air.
Just because I work here for RT doesn't mean I don't have editorial independence. And I can't stress enough how strongly I am against any state intervention in a sovereign nation's affairs.
The state-owned network announced today they would send Martin to Crimea to get a better perspective on the issue. However, Martin declined the offer. Considering the instability in the region, no one can blame Martin for a decision to stay home.
We're joined from the Ukraine by Russia Today Middle East Bureau Editor Paula Slier. Paula, good morning to you. And by Moscow Times journalist Gabrielle Tetraut-Farber in Moscow. Good morning, Gabrielle, as well. Now, first of all, there's also another anchor, Russia Today anchor, in the United States that has resigned, I think, yesterday, as late as yesterday evening. Let's take a look at what Liz Wall of RT, of Russia Today in the United States, said on the air a couple of hours ago.
Last night, RT made international headlines when one of our anchors went on the record and said Russian intervention in Crimea is wrong. And indeed, as a reporter on this network, I face many ethical and moral challenges, especially me personally, coming from a family whose my grandparents came here as refugees during the Hungarian Revolution, ironically to escape the Soviet forces. And that is why personally I cannot be part of a network funded by the Russian government that whitewashes the actions of Putin. I'm proud to be an American and believe in disseminating the truth, and that is why after this newscast, I'm resigning.
Paula Slier, in the Ukraine. Thank you for joining us this morning. I don't want to put you on the spot because you're one of my favorite people. I do want to ask, though, what is going on at Russia Today? And are there any reactions within the network to what's happening there with anchors?
Well, yeah, the truth is that I don't really know much more than what you know yourselves. Russia Today has released 2 statements. It called the resignation of this American news anchor, as well as, to quote them, self-promotional stunt. And they say that they draw a distinction between her role as a newscaster and Abby Martin's position as an opinion host. I'm just reading from their statement. Right. They say when a journalist disagrees with the editorial position of his or her organization, the usual course of action is to address those grievances with the editor. The latest we've heard on the Abby Martin story is that the offer has been extended to her to go to the Crimea. She herself admitted that she did not know enough and was not that intricately involved in the story, but that she has declined that invitation.
No, interesting, and do stay with us because I do want to touch also on what's happening where you're at in the Ukraine in a minute. But Gabrielle Farber in Moscow with us as well. Gabrielle?
Morning.
Morning. Okay, I mean, this is, and you correct me if I'm wrong by saying that this is unusual for, state-owned television anchors to go on and make such opinionated statements on the air. What are the reactions in Moscow to this kind of phenomena?
These types of things happen periodically here in Russia, but given that most Russians consume their news through television, this is quite a big thing for now. Usually the coverage, especially from state-run television, is extremely positive for Russia and for the Russian Federation. But journalists need to understand as well that they have to be loyal to whoever pays their paycheck. And I mean, if you work for Russia Today, you have to understand that you work for the Russian state. And that's just a reality that people understand here. But people's vision of this conflict is extremely molded by state television. And obviously that is being used to promote a certain vision of this conflict.
No, and interestingly enough, now in terms of, as you say, that Russians consume all their information, from those state-owned television channels, what is the specific reaction, for example, to, to Abby Martin, to that? Because I read only Western press on it, and I'm wondering what the people of Moscow are saying about that.
It's not a topic of hot interest, given that it's not in Russia itself. If a Russian news anchor on Channel 1, for example, did the same thing, then people would be talking here. But even though it's RT, it's quite a far distant reality for Russians in Moscow here.
And media, not only that, but coverage of this crisis, has been criticized, not by the journalists, but the fact that information, is having a hard time flowing out. Paula Slee, you're in the Ukraine. First of all, you arrived there, I think, yesterday. We had several reports, Paula, along the last several days, like, the ultimatum that supposedly the Russians have given to the Ukrainian fleet. Is it hard to get, to two-source information in this conflict? Because, there is the argument that there's just a lot of propaganda on both sides coming out.
There certainly is a lot of propaganda on both sides coming out. I mean, I can tell you here, not only working now in the city of Dnipropetrovsk, but also before, when I was working in the eastern Ukraine, most of the state media at the moment, and I'm talking now about radio and TV, are controlled by the state. You get very little pro-Russian sentiment coming through the state media. Most of the Russian TV channels, in fact, are blocked. So people here are not getting necessarily the Russian point of view. They're having to rely on the internet, where, of course, there can be blocks put into place. It's also quite difficult working on the ground. I mean, I go around with an RT mic, so people are familiar that RT stands for Russia Today, and depending on the protests I go to, it can be a little bit threatening. This is a divided city. You have almost as many people that are pro-Russia that are as those that are anti-Russia. And yesterday I attended 2 demonstrations, and certainly the reaction when I'm in the pro-Russia demonstration is people are shouting, Russia, Russia, Russia. They want to talk to me. But it was literally across the street that you had an opposition rally. And I can say that on a personal level, I did feel a little bit threatened. I had people coming up and saying, I want to give a message to Putin. We are going to kill Putin. Yeah. So, and that is the sentiment that journalists have expressed to me before, that depending which channel they work for, they are feeling intimidation.
Yeah, definitely. Paula, fascinating stuff. I'm glad you're there so we can talk to you further on throughout the week. Gabriella, thank you as well. And before we go back, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Welcome back. It is still Thursday, March 6, 2014. This is still the morning edition on I-24 News, where you should be. And last I checked, I'm still Yael Levi. Now, to our next topic. An enterprising association of sex workers in Barcelona has angered some of Spain's most prominent feminists by offering an intro to prostitution course in response to what its members say is a growing number of women turning to sex work in the wake of Spain's financial crisis. We're joined in studio by I-24 News senior editor Ruthie Sinai. Ruthie, good morning to you.
Good morning, Yael.
And before we break this down, let's take a look at the following report.
This may sound as an absurd bit of satire from a sketch comedy series, but in Spain it's reality. 45 euros would buy one a spot in a beginner's workshop dedicated to women turning to sex work. Asociación de Profesionales de Sexo, a group of 8 women who are trying to improve conditions for sex workers in Spain, have already held protests last month, fighting against legislation limiting their trade. This workshop is another shot at normalization, with its mission statement being that they wish both to assist women who have just entered the industry, as well as to improve workers and set standards.
The 4-hour course was attended by 15 women aged 22 to 50. Newcomers to the sex trade in Spain are estimated to be motivated by the harsh financial crisis that has, over the past few years, left many unemployed and struggling against a crippled economy. But not everyone is happy about this development. Prominent feminist activists in this country are already planning to meet Spanish politicians and demand inquiry into whether this workshop is receiving any public funds. While prostitution in Spain is not legal, it is also not criminalized, nor is it regulated in any way.
And we're also joined from Madrid by the Locals editor, George Mills. George, good morning to you.
Good morning.
Okay, I mean, who's terribly angered by this, and what are the reactions in Spain to this course?
I think a lot of people are just scratching their heads. They're very confused about it. Who's angered? We've got a group of quite high-profile feminists in the northern region of Catalonia who have really taken against this idea. The general reaction, as I say, is one of confusion.
Now, the group that has, masterminded and held the course, they've done things like this before, correct?
They are constantly fighting for women's rights. It's a pretty loose group alliance of women, actually. But yes, they've taken to these sort of causes before.
Now, when it comes to Spain's situation, it's no secret, of course. The economic situation in Spain is horrific. And this type of course was intended to do what in terms of helping women that are choosing to, enter the oldest profession in the world because of the situation, but to do exactly what in that course?
Okay, the course looked at all sorts of things ranging from health issues like sexually transmitted diseases to financial matters, really pretty much everything that someone starting any kind of job would want to know, I suppose.
And okay, then we're going to touch on that in depth in a second with another woman in the studio. But that said, what is the reaction from? Is the government reacting to this? I mean, they're not being arrested. I know it's not legal. I mean, prostitution is not legal, but it's also not criminalized, is it, in Spain?
No, it's not. And like many other things in Spain, the laws are actually a step behind the reality on the ground. The government hasn't, the federal government hasn't taken any major steps to regulate prostitution. And what they've basically done is said, well, we'll see what happens and we'll make it up as we go along. So what's going on now is that we have a group of women saying that's not good enough. You have to deal with the reality as it is.
No, and in some ways it's hard sometimes to disagree with that. George, thank you so much for shedding light on this story for us. And we are joined by Ruthie Sinai. You've researched this a bit further.
Yes. But listen, I mean, it's, as you said, the oldest profession
in the world.
It's something one has thought about a lot.
Exactly. The course itself, let's just try to touch on that. Okay. What do we know about the course? What was in it?
The woman who initiated it was a housewife whose husband's business went under in 2007. Wow. And she said that she was washing dishes one night and she heard on the radio a story of some prostitute who makes 200 euros a day. And she thought, well, that's interesting. And that's how she got into it. I mean, this is not one of these, hard luck stories of, abuse. Growing up in an abusive family, being addicted to drugs, and then falling into prostitution. This was like a calculated choice, if you can. Now, look, feminists will always tell you, it's an age-old argument. Feminists will tell you there's no choice because women who go into prostitution, and men for that matter, really have no choice. I mean, this is kind of, the last resort. My view of it, and the opposite view of it is that, for some women working in a meatpacking plant is the last resort, and plucking chickens and, walking in pools of blood or all day, or cleaning toilets for that matter is the last resort.
And the argument that, I would raise, and, I'm thinking about it, if we're looking at Europe nowadays and the financial situation in a place like Spain, and you just described this woman's situation who was behind this course, as you said, she's basically a housewife that's trying to make ends meet. Okay.
Yeah.
Now,
ends meet might not be the right.
True, may not be the right. This is so hard to step around this. No. Very.
No,
like
but
that economic hole, you know, with the lucrative
totally,
activity.
totally. This is a serious business.
It is serious business, but wow.
No, seriously now, the question of, you know, on the one hand, what they're saying, this group is saying is, you know, they're saying to feminists, look, you claim that we're victimized. You claim that the women who in the sex trade are victimized. We're trying to, you know, take control of our profession, take control of our lives, regulate this in some way, teach women how to handle themselves with clients, how to, you know, market themselves, how to keep books, you know, I mean, everything that you need for any other kind of independent, you know, profession.
No, it raises the question also, regardless of how you enter that profession, isn't that some form of, I don't want to say training, but isn't this the type of help that a woman who is in that profession might need, no?
Oh, absolutely, no doubt about it. But you know, the thing with societal attitudes to this, I mean, you mentioned, and rightly so, it's not regulated in Spain, as in many countries, it's in limbo. It's the same thing as in Israel. It's not illegal, it's illegal to pimp, but it's not illegal to be a prostitute.
Right.
Now, some countries have decided to deal not with the supply side, but with the demand side, you know, to criminalize the Johns, you know, to criminalize the buying of sex services. In Scandinavia, for instance.
Does it work there?
Well, to some extent, yes. Although, you know, figures, you can always mess around with figures to show, you know, whatever it is you want to show. Apparently in Sweden it works, yes. The number of prostitutes is down. However, you know, my claim on this is that you really don't know, because, you know, most women don't ply their trade on the streets anymore. You know, I mean, between, you know, all the gadgets
exactly.
and
I mean, this
internet
has moved
and stuff.
into the digital arena.
Into the digital arena and into homes and into rooms and into hotels and whatever. So I'm not sure that there are very good statistics on this. And, you know, I think the problem with criminalizing it is, of course, that it pushes it underground. What these women are doing, you know, I mean, I'm not, you know, I don't feel terribly comfortable with it. But what they are doing is at least trying to, in some way, protect themselves and regulate themselves, and actually shine some sort of sunlight on this thing, so that it's not, you know, done in underground cellars and away from.
It's sort of called the dirty underbelly of cities or the internet, you know, nowadays.
Sure.
And I think one of them actually said that would like to prove to people that we don't have three eyes and we're not monsters.
Right, yes, and
you know,
that too. But it's a horrible business.
It is,
you know, without.
That doesn't take away from that. That's, you know,
worse than dry cleaning.
Luckily, we have Tony here. It is, you know, it's a horrible business, but in many ways, it's an interesting phenomena to see it happening in a place like Europe, which is also one point.
And in a place like Spain, which is so Catholic.
Yes. Oh, no. Didn't think about that. Very good point.
And, you know, I mean, the figures show that there's hundreds of thousands of sex workers in Spain. I mean, the last figures are from quite a few years ago, but they're talking about something like 400,000, which to me is mind-boggling.
No, it's
but, you know, if you travel in Europe and you see this, especially in Central Europe, you see the truck drivers and you see the women standing by the side of the forest in the snow. I was in Poland last year in March, and you know, it's horrible snow and cold, and the women are standing there, you know, waiting for these lorry drivers who are traveling from state to state. You know, it's
no, but as we said, it's the oldest profession in the book. It's not going to go away.
No,
it's not going to go away, and it's a matter of how societies deal with it. And in many ways, that's, you know, one way to look at and see, you know, the women taking charge of if they're already in the business. Ruthie Sinai, thank you for shedding light on this, and we're moving onwards. And now we're going to see if Tony can actually, you know, pick up from this one.
Oh, well, you know, speaking of trucks, if I may.
Yes, Tony with the web review.
Yes. And the Malibu Times was reporting that yesterday, guess who was backing up trucks and all sorts of things on the Pacific Coast Highway in Malibu? Benjamin Netanyahu.
No.
Yes, because he was doing his various business.
Hollywood.
Yes. Thank you.
So many undertones.
Chapeau.
So,
so that was causing a bit of a buzz out in California.
Malibu?
Yeah, you know, it's a very, you know, that highway, it's right along the coast, not a lot of leeway there for a lot of traffic. So
actually
raising the hackles of drivers.
Nice. I have to say that for us, mere mortals who live here in the Middle East, I lived in Jerusalem for several years, and every time that, you know, he was...
Motorcade.
Yeah, the motorcade. So, you know, let them suffer in Malibu a little bit. I'm just saying, yes.
Malibu. Well, actually, also in California, some great news sort of related to this other topic in Spain. 1 in 10 Americans think that HTML is an STD, the LA Times reports. Gosh, I'm proud to be an American when I see stories like that. Not.
Nice.
For those who don't know, HTML is hypertext.
There's so many people with STDs then in the United States. Wow.
Yeah. HTML makes websites.
Yes, thank you.
But not 1 in 11 Americans doesn't really
1 in 11,
that. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Ouch. God. Yeah. That's
good stuff. Good times.
Yes. No. We're proud. Very proud of you. And,
so.
And what else?
Yeah. Well, have you heard about the meme hottie?
No.
Okay, a Florida mom, naturally, of 4, became an internet sensation because of her DUI mugshot, which it was on this website called InstantCheckmate.com, which does background checks of people's criminal records and such, and it kind of went viral for good reasons, but she claims that they were trying to make money off of her breathtaking image.
No,
so
but I have
suing.
to say, I'm sorry. I never drove drunk. Never, ever.
Good,
That's
good.
bad. Nobody should do that. I've had my share of wine. I never looked like that.
I guess.
Come on. Yeah.
She's great.
No, she's looking good. Looking good there. Orange is the new black.
Orange is the new black. Anyway, so that's causing a bit of internet buzz. How is she gonna win that lawsuit or not? Probably she will, I think.
She probably will. Gotta love America.
You know who's not gonna win any awards anytime soon is the exclusive Per Se restaurant, Chef Thomas Keller's Uber restaurant in New York.
Right.
Okay, $310 fixed price lunches. Well, they got a slap on the wrist for getting a C-grade health violations out the wazoo at this very famous New York restaurant. Yes, I mean,
like roaches?
Well, they didn't. It wasn't really going to that level, but there was a lack of soap in hand washing areas.
Nice.
The food prep area was hot and cold items were at the wrong temperatures. Smoked fish.
Ugh. And and the things that can happen.
If they charge $310 for lunch, they can afford to pay the.
Exactly.
This is the kind of place that when it opened, the foodies in New York were oohing and awing and and well, you know.
Yeah, they went on.
And they're gonna get smoked fish at wrong temperatures.
Exactly.
So I think they're going to be on the ball with that now in the kitchen. Also in kitchen news, culinary news in New York. You know, Chef Todd English, celebrity chef behind Olives and Figs and the Todd English Food Hall. Well, he's been doing more than cooking. Okay. Apparently, he had a very open situation with 2 lovely ladies at a club called Provocateur.
Well, the name of the club probably.
In I think Manhattan's Meatpacking District. I mean, it was sort of PG-13. You know, nothing overly untoward, but the fact that it was so brazen, and this is a guy that has got a restaurant empire, 3 kids, a couple. He left one wife at the altar at the St. Regis Hotel.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah. Erica Wang. So people are saying that he's gone off the rails. Why? We don't know.
Well, he's got access to all this whipped cream. I'm just saying.
Like creme brulee.
Like creme brulee.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So New York Post is all over that. And on a more historical note,
please.
This story about
from threesomes and whipped cream to history.
To buried treasure. The Daily Beast has this story about the mysterious booty on Oak Island. This is an island, their choice of headline, off the coast of Nova Scotia, which apparently Captain Kidd may have buried his treasure there before he was executed in 1795.
Who's trying to attract a lot of tourists there?
What's the deal with the parrot?
Thank you. That was my question. Why is everything black and white and the parrot there is in color?
Ask Tina
Why
Brown.
Is the parrot there?
No, she left the Daily Beast, didn't she?
Yeah, she did.
Yeah,
she did.
And I don't read the Daily Beast a lot, but they're having some fun with the graphic. Oh, because FDR was one of the people that tried to look for that treasure back in the day. That's what. I don't know if he used that bird to help, but I think the bird was.
Okay.
I don't know. The bird is just there for effect. But apparently it's back in the news because of the recent this California couple that found $10 million worth of gold coins has sort
of.
Then
now that didn't the federal
the government's going to take want
it?
Keep it. Yeah, surprise.
Yeah, I know.
Tax man. Beatles song.
Beatles song, real quick.
Anyway, so that's back in the news because it's generated interest in finding the treasure.
And a little bird in my ear tells me that's all the time we have.
Oh, Katy Perry tomorrow.
I know, but with parrots we leave you and we get back, actually, with images of dolphins stampeding and whales off the Dana Point and Maui that are captured from the air by drones. It's going to be breathtaking. Stay with us because you should. First, though, let's hear some more of the morning headlines. Welcome back, and thank you for joining us because it's still Thursday, March 6th. It's the morning edition. It's I-24 News, and it is where you should be. So, basically, we are joined by Daniel Roth of The Economy magazine.
Good morning.
Okay, good morning to you. Always a pleasure to have you. And what financial mess are we discussing today?
Well, Venezuela, it's both in turmoil, and yesterday was the one-year anniversary of Chavez's death.
Oh, it was yesterday.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's a very, very big deal in the country. They aired for the first time on TV Oliver Stone's documentary called My Friend Hugo. And there was a big parade, and Maduro said they're breaking off ties with Panama because Panama supports the U.S. and all sorts of, but overall, Venezuela is going through some really, really tough times.
Now, before we take a look at the report, which they're just setting up, it's just a question in terms of the Venezuela situation. What has been happening there in the last several days? Because what was it, 2 weeks ago that the whole mess broke out?
For a few weeks now, there's been protests, student protests, mostly led by opposition, right-wing students and opposition parties that don't like Maduro, didn't like Chavez so much, though liked Chavez better because he's more charismatic. He was more charismatic, and so there's been what it's turned into is sort of evening every night major protests.
And we can take a look at your report. Let's take a look.
Long queues outside supermarkets are an all too common sight in Caracas these days. People wait for 1, 2, or even 3 hours to buy basic foodstuffs, which are in short supply in Venezuela.
I'm queuing to buy toilet paper, flour, butter, whatever there is in the shop.
And sometimes, after hours of waiting, people still leave empty-handed.
I came to see if I can find some products, but from what I can see, there's nothing but a queue.
Despite owning the world's biggest proven oil reserves, the central bank says that 1 out of 4 basic products is unobtainable or hard to find in Venezuela. These shortages, along with a 56% inflation rate and soaring crime, have brought thousands into the streets in recent weeks for protests that have often turned violent.
It's become very hard to find dollars because the state has cut off the currency sources in the private sector. On the other hand, there's a fall in production of the expropriated public factories, which means there's a shortage of supplies. And all this means there's no local production or stable imports, which leads to fewer products and more shortages.
But the socialist legacy of the late President Hugo Chavez is still strong here and has tempered protests in some working-class neighborhoods like this one. Chavez set up supermarkets with state-subsidized goods sold to local residents at much lower prices, making them less likely to blame the government for Venezuela's dire economic crisis.
Having this place has been very good for us because it gives a lot of benefits to those living in this area.
With no quick fix to Venezuela's economic woes, these benefits will be increasingly precious in the weeks and months to come, even though everyone has to wait their turn.
So Daniel Roth, Economy magazine, I-24 News, what did they want?
Look, there's a lot. From 99 to 2014, there's been a socialist in government. Most of that time was Chavez, and most of that time, as we said before, it's a very charismatic man. So people were much happier with him, with the kinds of reforms he was pushing through.
Did they do good for Venezuela, though, those reforms?
Look, 2 million people have access to higher education that didn't before Chavez. 70% of the country was lifted out of 70% of people in extreme poverty were lifted out. 50% of people in poverty in general were lifted out. 40,000 community councils were erected. Hospitals in rural areas were set up.
Yeah, I think it's important to hear, because Chavez being such a polarizing character in the international arena, I think we tend to forget that, as you said and continue saying, he did reform the country, didn't he?
In huge ways. Now, the backlash has to do also with the fact that finite resources are finite. So it means when you're making the country a public entity, by and large, you're taking away private power. And so people who had private power in Venezuela, upper middle class and wealthier people, tend to have backlash towards that. And under Maduro, it's been easier to kind of stand up to that because, Chavez was Chavez.
Sure.
Now, shortages of toilet paper and milk, it's interesting. People blame both the management of some people blame the mismanagement of the government, and some people blame actually private companies that have been price gouging, sometimes up to 1,200%, raising prices.
1,200%.
So yeah, which the government had to fine them. There's blame enough to go around. There's a rampant crime, violent crime went up 380% under Chavez, and in the last 15 years or so, and that was one of the big deals that caused instability, caused a lot of foreign money to leave, and has been a big problem. And it was one of the things in 2009 they set up a national police force, something they didn't have before. They only had local police and an army, and nothing in between. So it led to a lot of corruption on a local level, and an army that wasn't trained in
to do actually anything in street in terms of urban, policing, or so to speak.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, and finally, though, where is Venezuela heading economically with this? As we're looking at these demonstrations, with what you're describing, seems to be, and again, layman's terms, don't understand, seems to be slightly spiraling out of control. I mean, can the new administration actually lift it up and out of where it's standing right now?
Well, look, I was talking to someone a little while ago who said, is Venezuela, like Ukraine? And there's major, major differences. One of them is that the army is by and large behind the government. Right. They're not going anywhere. Number two is that the number of people in the streets is not that big. There's not that many people in the streets if you compare it to something like Ukraine. There are people in the streets often, and they're
persistent, so to speak.
And there is violence in the streets between protesters and soldiers, but it's not as widespread as it seems. And one of the things that has marked this situation is the kind of social media war. So it's very hard to know what's going to happen because it's very hard to know what's really happening there now.
Right. No. Fascinating. And also, Putin's not interested. I just said that. Daniel, thank you for joining us this morning. Stay with us because it's the highlight of the week. Flattery will get me everything. We are joined by environmentalist and journalist Netta Achitov with, my favorites, one of my favorite segments. I say that to everybody, but still.
I know, but I believe you.
Every time you fall for it. And what do you have for us?
And we have animals today.
Yes!
We will start with humans before. In Algeria, the government decided to invest $60 billion in green projects and to make
Algeria?
Nice. And to make the country green until 2030. And this is the first project that is really actually going on. It's a recycling factory that takes plastic bottles and make it into wadding and textile, and they're actually really successful. They take 1.2 million bottles a day, and they produce 30 tons of raw wadding and 50 tons of textile in it, and they have 780 employees, which is really good.
It's giving work. It's giving
work, recycling. It's really a beautiful project. Also, the EU helped finance this factory, but this is a really promising start, and and the footage is nice. To see.
No, I'm now completely obsessed with how that's how you do it, huh?
Yeah.
How do you make textile out of plastic bottles?
They become really small particles, and then out of that you
fascinating. It's all.
So we don't need cotton anymore. You can do it out of plastic bottles.
Okay,
amazing,
it's a whole new dawn for us.
Yes.
I know. I'm looking at it, thinking, what shirt would that make? But okay, yes, continue.
This was promising. Now we're going into a pessimistic.
Of course, because
story,
how can you come without anything depressing? Of course,
yes.
Yeah.
In Bangladesh, the tanneries, this is the most fastest growing export in Bangladesh, and it's toxic as hell. Soon you will see the drum, which is a cocktail of toxic chemicals, and it takes raw leather. Here, this is the drum. It takes raw leather and make it soft.
Turns it into...
Yeah, and it's for shoes actually that we in the West wear, and in Japan and China. And
that's
as you
all
can
the
see,
made in Bangladesh.
Yeah, the streets. 90% of the residents and the workers in the tanneries have either cancer or asthma or other sort of lung disease. And it seems that the government doesn't do anything because
I was
they
about to
actually,
say, there's any,
no.
I'm not even being naive. There's and will it, is there any kind of discourse?
As someone
in
said, it's a
Bangladesh?
lawless area and no one touches it. And
I noticed they weren't even wearing shoes in the pit
no shoes.
of chemicals.
Very good
They
point.
have minimal
My
protecting things. Yeah, they are really. It's really bad there. So check out next time when you buy your shoes. Check out
definitely, because
where are they
eventually,
from.
it's just horrifying stuff that at least it's coming to our attention. It does give work to people, but then the diseases I can assume that they die of. Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Now for the
thank you, because
good part of the day. Really, this is the most touching footage I've ever seen. I think of a mother and a calf. It was taken out of a drone of a guy who has a whale and dolphin safari in Southern California.
He has a what? He's a dolphin safari?
Safari, yeah. He takes you on his boat and you see dolphins and whales.
Yeah.
But this time he didn't
Sorry,
take...
Daniel, we're having a chick moment. Yeah.
This time he didn't take tourists.
This is an everyone moment.
It's amazing.
He took footage of the dolphins. Southern California is the place where there is the most concentration of dolphins and whales. There are 400,000 dolphins there. And soon
And what are they doing? I mean, this part of it is what,
they
like
are
a stampede?
immigrating. Yeah, they're
immigrating.
in order to
They're moving
breed.
en masse.
Yes, they're moving in mass. And
It's like
this is 5 minutes.
Like the Jews.
Yeah.
Okay.
Anyway,
yeah.
Drone really changed the way we can film them and watch them, and it doesn't bother them.
This is a fabulous use of drones, by the way. I have to say, when you think
much
of
better,
much better than pinpointed assassinations from
and
the air.
I hope we will see the mother and a calf.
So there's a mother.
Fast forward to the mother and the calf.
If we can see the baby.
Yeah, it's a
newborn
humpback whale.
If you can, okay.
And
no, we didn't see it.
And they snuggle together for a long time, and it's.
You're killing me now. Okay.
It was really touching, but
that was beautiful.
I'll bring it next time.
Yeah. And wait, hold on. Here it comes. Supposedly, let's see. It's coming. Yeah. Okay. Wow. Is that?
No.
That's not it. Never mind. Okay. Let's move on.
From afar.
Yeah. Okay. Then what else?
Okay. On the border of Portugal and Spain, it used to be an agricultural land, and it was deserted because farming is not good.
Not really,
but now it's a really nice place. They're rewilding the place with animals that are domesticated, but they are, originally were wild. These are horses. They don't have any saddle, no shoes, nothing. They're just
really
wild
living
horses.
The way it should be living, free in the wild.
They're called Retuerta horses, and they are the most ancient horses known to humankind, and there are 150. That's it, all over the world. And in this place, they just live and roam, and people don't touch them, they don't feed them, they just watch them and see how...
you're amazing me because you've brought more, optimistic visuals and news on this, bleak environmental planet that we're living on.
Yes. Look at this. This is beautiful.
Yeah.
They just watch them and see how they, how they deal, what's their habits.
Any kind of information just out of interest, but it's horses. It's not other wild animals.
And
I always
also
think that
there's also a Toyota.
Toyota, it's very wild.
It also needs to live in the wild and be free. But
also,
is it hard to reintegrate animals?
No, apparently it's kind of easy. They just put them there as a group.
Right, because it's always the argument of people who like to keep animals in captivity, that they're never going to survive the wild.
So they survived, and they put also cows there to see how they, they deal when no one takes their milk. And also some wild cats and birds and
a Toyota.
So this is a really and a Toyota. A really beautiful experiment and rewilding. This is the hottest topic now in the world. Rewilding.
Rewilding?
Yes.
Okay. There's certain areas I would like to rewild. I'm just saying.
And last, this is also very beautiful. This is a time lapse of 3 weeks of a black-eyed pea being grown in plastic. This plastic is actually has been developed in Harvard. It's made out of, you would like that, a shrimp shell. Yeah.
How did
so
you know?
It's a biodegradable, biodegradable plastic, and it can, you can do many things with it. One of them is growing black-eyed pea.
Black-eyed peas.
Yeah, this is beautiful how it grows there.
I thought you were talking about the band, and I was going to be really amazed.
Yeah, they're environmentalists.
Yeah,
there are some
them?
celebrities, but not black-eyed pea.
So, and this is the plastic, and it's a good thing because?
Because it's degradable and it's made out of natural material, and because Harvard developed it. And we like,
And we like Harvard and smart
we like
people
science.
who do. Yeah, that's phenomenal.
Yeah, and
that
it doesn't need
plastic
soil.
is
This is amazing.
It's good. And no, this is unbelievable.
All the nutrients, everything is in this.
One, and that thing was a shrimp. It was a shrimp shell once, right?
Yes. It was once a shrimp, and now it's soil and
real
nutrients
quickly,
for black-eyed
supposedly, we have the baby
calf.
dolphin.
Yes,
come on,
watch
we
it.
think. Let's see, because otherwise we.
Yes.
Hallelujah.
Here they are.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's a whole 3 minutes of them cuddling.
Unbelievable. Okay, we're gonna. I'm gonna, say
look
goodbye
at that.
over these images. Oh, sweet. And that's a baby dolphin.
No, a humpback whale.
Humpback whale, like me.
He was just born. He's like 3 weeks
Okay,
old or something.
Okay, and on that, we leave you guys. This is it for this morning. Visit us on the web, on our Facebook page, I24 News. Don't forget to join us tomorrow morning to start your day every single day. And take a look at this.